I've described Epic's scaling as Riot's scaling on steroids. Riot started out as a startup and went kind of on your normal trajectory through their hockey stick. Epic was a 300-person company for 20 years, and then they hockey sticked to 5,000 people. That created a really interesting environment where you had really ingrained, long-held beliefs about how a team should work and how a company should work and how technology gets built and all that kind of stuff that simply just had not scaled. And there was quite a bit of suffering.
Welcome to the Gaming Founders Podcast, a show where we interview the founders that have shaped the gaming industry. I'm Eden, the CEO of Pragma. We build tools for studios to connect with their players and essential services, including First Look, our player relationship platform, Connect, and Engine, our cloud and source-based backends that power many of the world's best studios today. If you have an interest in getting exclusive access to the game industry's best early access games, sign up at playtest.firstlook.gg.
And I'm Kevin Zhang, partner at Upfront Ventures. We're a venture capital firm based in LA and San Francisco. I lead game investments both in studios as well as the pick and shovel tools that power game developers and content creators to do their best work, including Pragma. We interview founders on their origin stories, the tactics that help them survive and thrive, and key lessons for anyone interested in building the next generation of leading gaming companies. Learn more and subscribe today at pragma.gg/gamingfounders.
Today, we have a special live episode recorded at the Pragma Online Services Summit. Kevin and I interview Mike Seavers, a true titan in the gaming industry, having served as the CTO or a senior technical leader at some of the most defining companies in games, Riot, Epic, and now Scopely. In this episode, Mike shares his unparalleled insights on leadership, specifically how to effectively manage engineering teams in hypergrowth environments. We'll explore critical cultural shifts that those companies face as they scale, the art of identifying who his high-impact leaders were, and the pitfalls that ultimately led to leadership failures. Mike also offers a perspective on the North American gaming industry, discussing its need for maturity and a more pragmatic approach to business and game development, and draws contrasts between mobile-first studios and traditional PC console developers. Tune in for an honest and deep dive into the business of making games and the leaders who drive it. All right, welcome everybody to the, this is our third online services summit. The original intention for us starting this was, it was really hard to get a bunch of engineers in a room together. And this is one of those rare opportunities where we get to do that. A lot of the structure of this is spent really allowing people to get to know each other and spend time talking to each other as opposed to us being able to get on YouTube and watch talks and things like that. So we have a couple talks, but we do a lot of roundtables, a lot of open time for people to spend time with each other. And then just a reminder, we have a Discord. I use it to ping you guys randomly when I'm like, I need to see someone at this particular studio. If you're not in the Discord, join it. And it's just a great way to be able to be like, I met this person. I can't remember. Or I don't have their contact information, but I can just DM them on Discord, which is great. Thanks for everyone who, and there's a bunch of people that, about half of us, I think, traveled from a different state or location. Thanks for making it out here. I am going to do some quick thank yous to sponsors. As you all know, it's a tough time for the games industry, so affording anything is difficult, and so we got a lot of sponsors. So thank you to the sponsors for allowing us to run this event. Okay, I'm gonna go through them real quick. Give you a quick ChatGPT summary of who these people are. Sorry if ChatGPT didn't give an accurate thing. You can work on your AEO. Is that what it's called? AEO? Something like that? Okay. AWS for games. We all use them. I don't need to talk about AWS for games. Pragma's on top of AWS. Almost every studio is living on top of their stuff. Hathora, they do server hosting. I know we've worked with them a ton. i3d.net, they have a global game server and network provider focused on low latency. CurseForge by Overwolf, they're the leading platform for game mods and creator monetization. Solsta they do build automation and deployment for live games. Rocket Science, they help studios launch and operate online games or work on the services side. KID, they do compliance and identity services to keep online play safe and legal for all ages. Unity and Vivox, this is multiplay. Unity's got the game engine, and Vivox powers voice, and then multiplay on the server orchestration side. And Navic is helping us on the media side, they do consulting and insights for game strategy, economy design, and growth. Pragma and First Look, obviously ourselves, doing the back end, and then player CRM. And then Upfront helped sponsor the dinner last night, which most of you guys were at. Upfront's an early stage venture capital fund. They're our first investor as well. Kevin, who's here, sits on our board and is also a very hardcore gamer too as well, which we need more of in the VC industry because they abandoned us 18 months ago or so. Okay, those are the sponsors. Like I said, we got an awesome lineup of talks, roundtables, things like that. Try to actually go out and meet each other. We're gonna try something new this year. We're doing a corny networking bingo to force you guys to get up and meet people that aren't just the people that you know. So we're giving out things like a Steam Deck, Steam gift cards, AirPods, things like that. So the idea is, I mean, you guys know how to play bingo. If you don't have one, the idea is get out and find someone that and fill out the cards, and then we will get as many signatures as possible on the bingo card. Just a fun thing to get us to get out of our seats and talk to each other. All right. So I think the first talk is going to be me and Kevin Zhang. We have something called the Gaming Founders Podcast that we have been doing for a while. Some of you guys told me you were listening to the Gaming Founders Podcast coming up to this event, so I appreciate the listens. But we've interviewed tons of founders and early stage folks at a lot of the biggest studios and platforms. The founder of Discord, founder of EA, the founder of Twitch, and tons of others. So if you guys haven't checked that out, you can just search Gaming Founders Podcast on Spotify, YouTube, iTunes. What is it called? Apple Music? I don't know, something. Apple Podcasts, something. We're gonna interview Mike Seavers, who a lot of you guys know. I don't think I need to do an intro for Mike. Well, I'll do a quick intro for Mike. Mike was the CTO at Riot, and then has worked at all the other successful game studios too. Just kidding. So he was then at Epic, had a short stint at Yuga, doing the monkey stuff, and then went to Scopely now, who's taken over the world. So Mike has become a recent friend, and I think he actually hired my co-founder too, or at least was part of the process of hiring my co-founder at Riot. So maybe give a round of applause for Kevin and Mike, and we'll bring them up here.
Where should I sit?
Maybe over there, and Kevin and I will do this.
Oh, the hot seat?
The hot seat.
No, I'll see you.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we'll look at you over here.
Hi, everybody.
All right, so we'll do. We're going to be talking a little bit about leadership, and particular leadership as it pertains to managing engineers and running the various organizations that Mike has run, and also what makes a failed leader too, which I thought we'd talk a little bit about this, and that would be a very interesting topic. And obviously, Mike, you've been at a lot of different studios that have different leadership, and so I'm really excited to see what you learned throughout the years. But maybe we could set the stage by starting with the Riot, and maybe like the lead up to how you got to Riot and where Riot was at when you first joined.
Sure. Yeah. Some of that is a blur. I've burned a few brain cells since then, but I first started. I was talking to Riot at the end of 2012. Joined at the beginning of 2013. I want to say the company was in total somewhere around 350 people back then. About 2/3 of that was engineering. We were just actually, there's some people in the room that might know this better than me. The history part again, it was I think we had just launched in South Korea, and the game was, it was kind of the bottom of the hockey stick, and it was a pretty crazy time. We were growing like crazy. The game was growing crazy. We were hiring people. Teams were, that was a pretty nutty time at the company.
And I guess what were some of maybe the changes that as soon as you joined and started Hockey Stick, and what were some of the changes that had to be put in place, and some of the cultural changes that were happening?
Yeah, it's so that period was I distinctly remember. It was really like everybody do whatever you can just to keep things running, basically. Riot's culture at the time, at least the way I would describe it, was, we'd hire great people, we'd give them a mission, and we'd say, go, just whatever it takes, right? Go get it done. Our infrastructure team, they were like begging, borrowing, and stealing servers in dark corners of the earth just to keep League scaling. And so it was, it was a time of like a lot of problem solving. I think a lot of collisions, right? I think it was around 2015, 2016. I distinctly remember the transition from, okay, like things started kind of leveling off a little bit. Now what do we do, right? Like now that we can take a breath. And there was kind of a period of, I would say, stabilization and kind of rethinking that approach of everybody do whatever you want to get a result. So,
do you remember roughly?
Oh, maybe flip it. There it is.
Yeah. All right. Do you remember roughly how many people it was at that time? And was there sort of a whole new crop of folks who came in that was more managerial, more experienced, et cetera? Or did a lot of the existing folks kind of pivot themselves into kind of new roles, new responsibilities, a new way of running things?
It's a great question. There was a period of leadership changeover for sure. And this is something I've seen happen many times now as a company scales. Some people can scale with the company and the demands of role change and new responsibilities and new culture shifts or ways of thinking or ways of working and new responsibilities, and some people don't. I couldn't put a number on it, but if you made me guess, I would say about 20% make it, and the rest kind of either flatten out, move into lateral roles, or end up leaving a situation like that. So there was definitely some changeover. I would say that was kind of the beginning of it around 2015, 2016, I think. That progressed for a couple of years. By the time you get to 2018, 2019, I think it was a completely different company. Leadership had almost entirely turned over in a lot of different places. So I don't remember how big we were around then. Probably 2,500 people would be my guess.
I guess, like, how did you, as you guys were scaling in that period, identify who was going to be like a high impact leader or like high impact person in the company versus like what were some of the systems to do that?
I'll never forget I'll never forget this day. There was a meeting. It was me, Eric Danker, who I think a lot of you know. I think Michael Saladino was there. Chris Himes, and we had just gone through a performance management cycle. I think we were doing 9boxing, and we noticed a pattern. We had a lot of people, a lot of managers that had stepped into director roles for the first time. They were struggling. They were struggling big time, and we were really trying to figure out like what was the difference between this profile and this profile, and so it's complex. But one of the things that we really boiled it down to was my thinking on this has since evolved. Like the director role is probably one of the hardest transitions you're going to make in your career because everything about that job is different. I think transitioning from director to VP is hard, but in a very different way. Getting into that director role is a complete, like everything about your job is different, and everything about the expectations are different. What's required of you, you can no longer rely on your IC kind of experience. You have to insert some of that organizational leadership capabilities, and that's a rough transition, especially if you don't have anybody to kind of hold your hand through that. So.
I guess how did you guys identify who would be successful, and then what did you do to train them after?
And how much time, right, before like, hey, look, I'm not sure this is working out.
For
any particular person.
I can tell you the signals, right? We used to call it. Is there anything squirting out the side? Right. I know it's a weird. But it's like, do you have your world in order? Right. Is your team accomplishing the results that it was expected to accomplish? Are you generally on top of all of the issues that are happening within your sphere? Are your people healthy, happy? If there are issues within the team, are you on top of it, or is it kind of? It's so this idea of like something squirting out the side was like, how under control is your thing? And so the people that were able to do that well, those people thrived. The people who did not do that well did not thrive. I can give you maybe an example. This won't be from Riot, but I remember starting one-on-ones with a person. This person started reporting to me, and I was asking them, first one-on-one, tell me what's going on. Oh, well, I have this issue, and this issue. Okay. How are you thinking about that? And they give me an answer, 2 weeks later. So how are things going? Tell me about those two issues that we talked about last time. Well, and it's just this constant kind of not really having their arms around these issues. And this went on for probably 2 months. And finally I confronted the person. I said, look, like, just to be clear, like the expectation is you're the one solving these issues, right? These can't go on for 2 months and not have a plan. And, they were kind of externalizing. That's actually more common than you'd think. I still see it today. And I see it in very senior leaders.
I'm going to ask a very VC follow-up question.
Yeah,
we love to pontificate about, the founders never fired people fast enough. And I'm just curious, like you've been in multiple small to large orgs.
Yeah.
Have that's kind of a truism everyone spouts, right? Is there a way to actually get over that? Is there a way to actually get better at like, hey, look, properly identifying, making the corrections faster? Or I'm curious how you've sort of dealt with that over the years.
Yeah. I've seen both sides. I've seen ruthlessness, right, with a total lack of empathy, and I've seen what you just described. I haven't seen a lot in between, if I'm being honest. How do you solve that? I think is complex. I fundamentally believe that, especially in the games industry, we do not do a good enough job of training or expecting people at director level and above to expand their repertoire of leadership capabilities beyond their individual function, right? So, I can tell you stories of being. I'm not going to name companies for this, but where it's like, well, this person's a senior director. Okay, great. Well, what are they doing? Well, they're writing code. Oh, great. How many people report to them? 40 people. Oh, interesting. I go talk to the 40 people. Tell me about your boss. Well, I haven't talked to him in 6 months. Okay, well, so you just like, there's this, we do not do a good enough job of telling people, hey, when you get to a certain level, your job changes from doing the individual contributor work, and this applies to engineering, art, design, product, you name it. You have to start thinking about the broader organization. You need to start thinking about what does high performance look like. You have to start thinking about the culture. You have to start thinking about all of those things that make a high performing team and organization, because no one else is going to do that for you.
And then, getting to how you train that, or maybe systems that you put in place to help actually get those people better.
Yeah, that's a good question. It usually starts with a conversation. I took over a team, this is a few years ago, and I watched this team work for a while, and there was a ton of this happening. And it was interesting because when I would have my one-on-ones with all the directors and senior directors, you could tell they were in pain. They were literally suffering. Their jobs were terrible. And I thought for a long time about how to approach them on this, but finally I pulled them together for a quick, kind of 2 hour, like, hey, let's just get together and talk about how things are going. And I reflected back to them. I said, hey, you guys seem like you're in pain. And they're like, yeah, our jobs suck. And I said, well, if I was doing your job like you were, I would think it sucked too. And they were like, what do you mean? And so that was the impetus. That was the beginning of a conversation where I had to just tell them, this is what good leadership at your level looks like. It is comprised of being a good contributor, but also a good manager, a good organizational leader, et cetera, et cetera. I will, in a situation like that, for example, I'll do some coaching. I'll see if people are actually kind of picking up what you're laying down. Some people just can't get over that hump, right? And so there's a kind of a decision on an individual level of like, can you go on that journey or not if you're that far off? Right. But it takes a lot of hands-on one-on-one coaching. It takes a lot of willingness to speak truth to people and with empathy in a way that maybe they've never heard before. It's pretty hard to go tell somebody like, hey, you've been told for 20 years that your job is to do A. I'm telling you, if you want to be successful, you need to do B. And you can watch their head spin around. And I've literally had people like scream at me and tell me I'm wrong. But it's, so.
Yeah. And I guess going back to the sort of Riot experience, going from basically like a startup culture where maybe there was a need to sort of move fast and iterate fast and those kinds of things to 2,000 plus people that are working on multiple games that need to have, when they ship anything, it's going to impact 100 million players and those kinds of things. Maybe what did you learn in that transition? And then maybe is there something that you would have maybe changed about that, some of those things that happen? Because you hear about all the time, what people will reflect on, hey, remember the good old days of blah, blah, blah versus now, or
sure. There's a lot of people in this room went on this journey with me. But I think the biggest thing was we had to transition from everybody can do whatever they want to some standards, to some common way of doing things. Riot was carrying around a huge weight of tech sprawl. Like we had technology, we had every technology on the planet somewhere. And I remember talking to a group of our new engineers that had just started. We did we called it denubification. We had a class for all the engineers. It usually was a month or two after they'd started, and I started seeing a theme of like, what has your experience been like? And they're like, it's really hard to get started here. Why is that? Well, because there's nothing standard anywhere. I've got to make all these micro decisions about, first I got to pick the technology I want to use, and then I got to figure out how to get it into our environment. And then and then I can be productive. That was really a turning point for us to start thinking about, okay, what would that look like? And that was a journey. It was a journey to get, a group of people, especially, close to 1,000 people who were used to coming to work every day and being able to control their own destiny, to be like, well, yes. And I need you to think about the company, and I need you to think about your coworkers, and I need you to think about the future engineers that are going to work here more than you think about yourself. And that was a tough transition. I'm glad I still am proud of that transition. I think we managed it pretty well. If I could do anything different, I think it would be, I don't think we moved fast enough. I think I would have been more forceful. I think Riot had a very consensus-driven culture. It was, go talk to everybody about everything and make everybody feel good about it before you try to even take the first step. The me, 5-6 years later, I think I would just be like, no, this is what we're doing. And I think I think we would have potentially got a better result faster. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, and I guess transitioning to maybe the next phase. So I think you joined Epic, and Epic was going through another scaling exercise. I guess what were some of the maybe differences and commonalities between the two? Yeah,
Epic. I've described Epic's scaling as Riot's scaling on steroids. There was a lot that was different in the sense that Riot started out as a startup and went kind of on your normal trajectory through their hockey stick. Epic was a 300-person company for 20 years, and then they hockey sticked to 5,000 people, that created a really interesting environment where you had really ingrained, long-held beliefs about how a team should work and how a company should work and how technology gets built and all that kind of stuff that simply just had not scaled. There was quite a bit of suffering at Epic because of that. Epic also, I think, grew faster than Riot. Riot went from 350 in 2013 to I think about 4,500 in 2019 when I left. Epic did that in the span of 2 years, right? They went from 300 to 5,000 in a couple years. Riot held the hiring bar very, very tightly, too much to the frustration of many people in this room. If you remember those days, Epic was kind of gloves off, hire anybody you can. That created some issues as well. So.
I guess was there any cultural differences from when I think about Riot? I think about this kind of player first, kind of business. Almost like business guys that were in the mod community, and that kind of founder DNA versus Tim being this technologist. Yeah. How did that shape the culture?
Yeah, Epic very much an engineering-led culture. I was in multiple meetings where Tim someone from I felt so bad for these folks sometimes. Somebody from marketing would be talking, and Tim would be like, "Where's the engineer in the room? I want to hear from an engineer." And if you've been at Epic at any period of time, you got used to those kinds of comments from Tim. So yeah, very engineering led. Which I frankly I kind of enjoyed that a little bit. It was really nice for things like Epic Online Services and the engine team, where you could really have a strategic conversation about technology with the founder of a company in a way that was meaningful. That was not always the case at somewhere at Riot, where engineering, I think, was you couldn't have that same kind of conversation. So they did create some cultural differences. Now, there's a dark side to that too, right? We didn't have great product management. We built a lot of bridges to nowhere. We hacked together a lot of stuff just to hit a deadline. And I think my takeaway is balance is good. So
you mentioned earlier about you wish during that transition at Riot looking back, you wish you could have been a bit more forceful? Like, was sort of Tim or that Epic culture that way, and did that help them, or were there sort of downsides to that approach too?
Yeah, it was very. Yeah, this is a nuanced question. Yes. When Tim said jump, everybody said how high. I mean, that was, and we would pivot the company on a dime. It would, today it was, get the Epic Online Store to, X. Tomorrow it's, we are shipping UEFN by GDC. The next day it's, we're shipping Lego, by 6 months later. And you just didn't, those big pivots were the ones that I think were good, because there was zero lack of ambiguity about what was important, right, as a company. It was just crystal clear to everybody. The number one priority is ship UEFN, Unreal Engine for Fortnite. Sorry, I'm using acronyms. Now, the dark side of that was, and I'll tie this back to leadership. I would ask, we'd be looking at our roadmap, and I'm hearing from the team, hey, this roadmap doesn't work, and I'm like, great, why are we still trying to make it happen if it doesn't work? Like, well, because Tim said. And I used to play a game with Dan Vogel, who was my boss, our COO. I used to play a game with Dan and Tim, and it was called Tim Said. And so I would go to every just about every one-on-one. I would walk into Dan's office and I'd be like, so here's what I heard that Dan and Tim said this week. And I can't tell you how many times the intent and the words did not match, right? And so I had to. One of the hardest things at Epic for me was to kind of retrain the leaders to like, okay, Tim said, but what did he mean, right? And if it doesn't work, why not tell him it doesn't work, and let's come up with a plan that actually makes sense. That was tough, but anyway. So
actually, I'd love to stay on that for a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, you're sort of alluding to how to manage up.
Yes.
Any more thoughts around, I mean, especially with sort of a founder like a Tim or
Sure.
co-founders or whatever, sometimes you have like, oh, that's the Tim whisperer. Let's all go to that person, which can work for a while. And then at some point, like, oh, that breaks down, or the person leaves or whatever. Like, any thoughts on sort of how to effectively do that and have it last longer?
Yeah. This may not be for everybody, but this is my style, this is my approach. This has worked for me. I will speak the truth with almost an unabashed, like I'm just like, this is the situation. And I do it unemotionally, but I have a project that I'm on right now. When I first started working on the project, the team thought they were going to ship the game in October, and I was like, that's crazy. There's no way you're going to ship this game in October. And I was the first person to tell this. I think I was the first person to tell the CEO that this date you've been hearing is just wrong. And that might sound crazy, but I'm like, what's the alternative? I have two choices here. I can lie to you and try to force a team into a bunch of pain in order to meet some criteria that is probably a farce anyway, because most people I know, even very demanding founders, are pretty reasonable people. It's just like, hey, the team isn't off by a week here. They're off by 12 months, right? And they're like, oh, well, gosh, I'm like, what are we going to do about that? They may not be happy, but at least you can come up with a plan that makes sense, and then you make a commitment that you're going to get it done, and you fix it, and you move on. And so that's my approach. That's usually what I tell people. I remember working through a pretty interesting situation with one of those Tim Saids, where the team had committed to a timeline that they knew they couldn't hit. And I was like, well, you got to tell them. And they're like, oh, we can't do that. I'm like, yes, of course you can. You have to. Otherwise you're going to miss the date. They're like, well, we'll take our knocks when we miss the date. Or we're not going to tell them now. And I was like, that's not how we lead. So.
Yeah, I think certainly appreciate when you hear the truth and you build trust, obviously, over time too as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, there's nuance to how you handle that conversation tactfully, but I have found time and time again that I have I've been able to move some of the most complex issues in an organization forward that people thought were immovable just by having a truthful conversation with the right people.
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of me is kind of thinking a little bit about this sort of maybe North American games industry like troubles right now around, I guess, staying competitive, where it feels like maybe, I guess maybe the narrative out there is like North American labor expensive and urgency levels are low. Maybe that's the narrative, right? I don't like. There's probably some truth to that and some like not truth to that. I guess, do you have a sense on, your thoughts on where the industry is going from a, like, what do we need to do better, I guess, as particularly in the North American side, and just sort of what are some ways that we can, I guess, really ship games faster? Just pushing sort of on your like, oh, the deadline's unrealistic, so we can't meet it.
Wow, it's a spicy meatball. Thanks, Eden. You all can beat me up later, I guess. I think the games industry has needed to and is just now coming to terms with maturing as an industry. It's been around for a while, but like I spent 15 years in enterprise software development before I joined the gaming industry. I had people tell me, I still have people tell me video games are different. I'm going to tell you, you're wrong. Software is software. There's a bunch of creative software out there in the enterprise that has the same, trappings that, they are different. It's a different kind of software, it is, but the teams, the processes, the mindset, the how you move something from a production perspective, from concept to execution and delivery to people is relatively the same. There are things that the enterprise software world has been doing for 20 years that the game industry just has either refused to do or won't do, because we don't want to be like those corporate people. And look, I'll be the first to tell you, I still have friends that work in those environments, and every time I go talk to them, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to throw up in my mouth, and I'm like, I'm so glad I work in games. So I'm not talking about the red tape and the bureaucracy and the inability to move forward and that kind of stuff. Like, I think that world could take something from gaming. But what I think has been, what I've seen in gaming at least, is just a lack of just kind of pragmatic maturity about the business. This is one of the things I really love about Scopely. I've told a couple of people this story this morning. Scopely has managed their fundamentals very well. It's in a lot of ways, Scopely is a finance-driven company, and I served them well. We are not we have budgets. We have hard yeses and hard nos on certain things. We have accountability meetings around our games and how they're moving, and that have actionable takeaways. And we are not afraid to kill things, and we're not afraid to continue investing in the things that need to be invested in. And so there's a business maturity and a process maturity, and every studio thinking they're the special flower that is different. I think is something the industry, if the industry wants to continue to be competitive, there are some things that we just don't need to reinvent the wheel around every time you start a company or every time you go to make a game.
I'm curious, actually. I mean, you sort of just alluded to the finance piece of it, but if we maybe also ask about, are there things around tech and product design that you've just sort of seen this pattern over and over again, that, hey, look, I think these are things that as a whole we should change and not do it this way?
Yeah, this is, I'm going to make some, I'll probably make some general statements here. There are exceptions to all of these things, right? But, I think we're finally over the, hey, we have to make our own game engine, right? In the industry. Now, are there times when that makes sense? Of course. But in general, let's UE and Unity are probably good for 90 8% of the use cases out there. We're starting to get convergence, I think, in platform technology. We're the 2015, 2016 era was pretty nutty when all the new stuff was coming online and service mesh and all of that kind of stuff. That's finally stabilizing. But I used to tell the team at Riot, and I still believe this. I think a guy named McKinley wrote an article one time. It's called "Choose Boring Technology." I think it's the best technology article ever written. Boring technology works. You don't have to think about it. It just runs. And so, find the best tool for the job. And use that tool, and then when it stops being useful, move to a different tool. The thing that I find myself fighting engineers on the most is they're like, well, but it only meets 85% of my use case. I need something that meets 100% of my, or I'm going to go write my own thing because it's missing that 15%. I'm like, you actually need to change your use case 15% in order to make that thing work, because you're going to pay for that for the next 20, 30 years until that thing goes away. So
that's why Pragma's on the JVM and gotten a little criticism for that over time, but it's boring.
Yeah. Yep.
It's old enterprise Java stuff.
Yeah.
I guess, and part of the DNA that you mentioned on the Scopely side is I wonder, contrasting the founder of Walter Javier plus their background, plus also just mobile and PC console having very different DNAs, with mobile being very, data driven, maybe to a fault to some extent.
Yeah,
and then
for sure.
The PC console industry being very much like, this is an art form, and and having a lot more looseness around that side of things. Yeah,
I don't want to. Yeah, I don't want my other comments. I don't want them to be mistaken, because there is nuance to it for sure. I think some of the high end game development is a lot like making making a Hollywood movie. You're going to spend $200-300 million. You hope it's a hit at the box office. Maybe not, right? I think that's where you're seeing the industry evolve right now, right? Is, even making movies, like, that's a pretty ruthless, like, factory kind of like, there's probably, a handful of people who get to exercise their creative muscle. But for the most part, it's a lot of people doing a lot of the boring things day in, day out, over and over and over and over again to actually get a movie out the door. Video games kind of the same way. But I think in a lot of ways we try to make it more than that, and some of that gets in the way of us just getting the job done.
Do you think there's maybe things that the mobile industry can learn from the PC console industry, and vice versa? Like, I think maybe having the lens of working at a maybe mobile first studio today versus the other ones.
Yeah, I think I'll answer that from a player perspective.
Right. Yeah.
And you'll find this anywhere. So, but I am going to kind of pick on the mobile industry a little bit. Games are supposed to be fun, right? And fun. Like, this is the thing that I think kind of just forgive me, but like, it kind of breaks my heart about where gaming is going, and even the film industry, to be honest. Like, I find very little original content out there now. We're like making the same movie 50 times because we found a formula that works, and we're kind of doing the same thing in gaming. I'd love to see more innovation, right?
How many match 3 games can we make?
Yeah, exactly. And look, like, some of those things can be fun, but you're flipping different switches in people's brains too. Right. So anyway, but I think if you were to, again, very, very broad generalization, I do think your PC console kind of titles tend to lean more into, like, is this a great experience, right? I think your mobile titles tend to lean a little more into, is this a great business?
Right, yeah. And I guess, like, the mobile space has really, really strong metagame systems that will generally encourage strong retention and those kinds of things. But maybe, like, from a fundamental standpoint, like, you're turning on certain... setting off certain things in your brain, but
and I sometimes wonder, like, what's the next evolution, right? Because free to play was the the big shift in monetization. I sometimes wonder, what is the next shift, if there is one, or is this what it is, forever?
Yeah, makes sense. I guess bringing some of the transitions from Scopely, which is, I guess, now in the news a lot for both the EA stuff. I mean, it doesn't directly, impact you, but Scopely seemingly has grown in its sort of, and now it's just the whole, I guess the whole parent company has grown in this sort of really ambitious move towards, being a multi-platform publisher, right? In a lot of ways. I guess maybe you could talk a little bit about the transition in this current, I guess, epoch in your career. And
it's actually one of the reasons I joined Scopely. I was coming to the end of my time at Epic. I was thinking about taking a break. Next thing I know, I'm on the phone with Walter and Javier, hearing about their ambitions to turn Scopely, this mobile game studio, into an omni-platform kind of company. What actually really resonated with me the most in that conversation was, I think it was Walter said, look, you could do nothing to Scopely. You could not make 6, 7, however many new titles we have on our slate, and still be wildly successful, right? But they weren't content with that. They're like, hey, what is the next evolution of this company? And they wanted to double down. They wanted to see, how far they could push it, and see if we could be the best gaming company in the world, right? And of course, everybody wants to be the best gaming company in the world. But I was like, to be at the top of your game and still want to push further in the way that they're trying to do it, I don't know, something that really resonated with me. I didn't want to just go make another game, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so I'm excited to be on that journey. There's a lot to change. There's a lot of shifts, happening. A lot of things that the company's having to figure out for the first time, because we haven't done cross-platform before, but we've hired some incredible talent. Some of it's here in this room, and we've got a great ambition. We've got the runway, and I think I'm excited about what we have on deck.
I'm curious if you've seen, given the existing successes on mobile, this foray now into PC console. What is the strategy? You mentioned all the hiring. Is it like, hey, look, we just need a whole separate team. We'll silo them. They'll go work on the PC console stuff. No, we got to mesh kind of the two things together. How do you figure out who internally to lead versus external?
Yeah. So this gets this is really just how Scopely is structured. Scopely is decentralized almost entirely. So every game is its own P&L. It's its own business unit. They roll up into divisions that are drawn around categories. So what we call the new slate is all one unit, basically. Those are primarily new teams, I would say, but there's a decent amount of folks we've moved from other titles at Scopely. Maybe 50-50 existing talent versus new talent. I actually don't know, but they do operate very independently from all the other games.
And then related to that, Scopely is also known for working with third-party studios, especially a bunch in overseas markets, and having done a great job with them pulling them in-house and et cetera. Like any lessons from how to do that well that you've seen, and does that apply to the PC console side? Yeah,
I can speak for myself. I don't know, but I think of in the due diligences that I've been a part of, I think of those in the same sense that I would think about anything else we've talked about. I'm usually the person, like, tell me about the team, tell me about the leaders, tell me about how they're wired, tell me about how they think, how do they plan, how do they deliver results, what do they do when they fail, how do they act when they fail, and and I will sometimes get, why are you asking these questions? Like, you're the tech guy, I'm like, well, because honestly, like in my 30-year career, I've seen very few technical issues that were technical issues. Almost all of them were people issues, or organizational issues at some level, and so to me, I think it's, find the great team that is aligned with your culture, your mentality, the way you want to work, the way you think, the way you solve problems together. Like this, especially when you're merging two cultures, I think really get into, okay, what are we going to do when we disagree? Who's going to win that argument, right? And how are we going to resolve that? And who has voting rights and who doesn't? That's a huge thing. Because I've seen that go really well, and I've seen that not go well. The other thing is just be clear on expectations too. I've seen people try to woo a studio by making promises that they can't deliver, and then you acquire them, and then you end up with angry founders or other people, and that's never a good situation to be in either. So, to me, the tech is obviously important, right? But to me, those are the easy things. Is it good tech? Is it not good tech? Does it scale? Does it not scale? How much tech debt is there? How buggy is it? Et cetera, et cetera. But when you're dealing with the studio or an acquisition or something like that, to me, it is all about the people.
Maybe one more personal question. I had randomly found out from LinkedIn that you're in seminary. Yes. And we share the same faith, and I just learned that. And so I was, curious, like, I guess, why did you decide to go to seminary as one? And then second, like, what are you maybe learning that maybe applies to a lot of the leader stuff that you do today? Yeah, it's
a great question. Yes. I'm entering my second year of seminary. And people ask me, like, are you going to be a pastor? And I'm like, no, I'm probably not going to be a pastor. That's not, I don't think that's my path. My journey to seminary is long, and if anybody ever wants to hear that story, I will tell you. My coming to grips with my faith has been a lifelong journey. It was actually a lot of my career that brought me to a kind of a crisis moment of faith, and now I fell onto this side of that. The thing that I think, to the second part of your question, I have long believed, and I believe this to be 1,000% true. The kind of leader you are is directly related to the kind of person you are. The kind of person you are is made up of your past, your background, your baggage, your struggles, your pain, your suffering, your triumphs. We're complex beings, and I don't think there's any. No, there's only a couple people at Riot that worked with me many years ago. I was a terrible boss. It was terrible. I mean, just outright bad. And it was because I was an arrogant little jerk. I thought I knew everything, and I thought I thought the world revolved around me. It took me a very long time to realize that, a lot of work is about dealing with humans and dealing with other people and dealing with their stuff. And you got to know how to do that if you're going to do it well, right? If you're going to do it well, if you're going to lead teams, you got to know what makes people tick. You got to know what who they are as people. And I find there's a lot, at least I'm getting a lot from my seminary training in terms of just thinking about people as complete humans.
That's great. And one final question that we ask in all of our interviews is, like, if you could kind of go back to young Mike early in your career, is there kind of one lesson that you'd communicate to yourself on something that you could either do better, or some message that you would give yourself?
Yeah, I think this is going to be related to your last question. I think I would have told my younger self that you're not going to find your identity and your purpose in your career. Right. I think I spent way too long trying to prove that I was worth something through bigger titles, bigger roles, bigger achievements, and that ultimately ended up hollow.
Great.
Very powerful.
Great place to end. Why don't we give Mike a round of applause? Yeah. Okay, we're gonna have some time for Q&A. So if anyone wants to ask a question, raise your hand. We can either get you a mic. James will get you a mic, and you can go from there. Over here.
So one of the things you were talking about was blending product and product and technology. I'm wondering about your thoughts about sort of senior leadership rooms where there's a lot of a lot of assumptions, usually about people turning up and being accountable. But sometimes on the technology side, you've got people who are maybe influencing and not directly accountable for making decisions, and there can be difficulty of getting technology people into those rooms.
Yes.
So I'm wondering what your approach or your learnings about that topic are.
Yeah. I don't know if this is going to be a satisfying answer, but it's my honest answer because I recognize the privilege I have now of some positional authority. It wasn't always this way, but now I will fight to get that person in the room. So I just took over a project. It's not in the best shape. Early on, as I was doing kind of due diligence on it, I was asking some of those questions because one of the signals, the reason I got pulled into it was the tech was not performing very well. And so I was asking about, tell me about how leadership meetings go, who's in them, and sure enough, tech director, I don't know if anybody had even talked to the tech director in some amount of time. And I pressed on that. And I was like, look, explain to me how you're going to build let's say you're a construction company. I use construction companies as an analogy all the time. Explain to me how you're going to run a construction company without having the foreman and the architect in the room. Seriously, it doesn't make sense, right? It really doesn't make sense. And most people are like, yeah, oh gosh, that's crazy. And to me, I think software is kind of the same thing. Now, I think tech leaders don't do themselves much service in a lot of cases. They don't help themselves out here. I think a lot of technical leaders haven't learned the language that happens in that room a lot of times, how to be succinct, how to know what people care about, and bring just that to the conversation in a business and kind of product-y sense, if that makes sense. And again, I'm generalizing. There's a lot of people who are very good at that, but it is not uncommon to find at companies, especially that aren't engineering led, like Epic, where people just don't think of the engineering side of the house as leaders. They're the people doing the work, and yeah, it's a huge misfortune. So you got to fight for it. You got to, or have somebody help you fight for it. I think, but I will also say, I don't let go of those things when if I'm like, what is the thing that's between me and success? And it's that I won't stop until I either get the outcome or I, reach the conclusion that I need to go work somewhere else where there's a better situation. So is that, yeah. Okay.
Other questions? Over here. There.
Jason from Hathora, nice to meet you.
Hi, Jason.
You've talked a lot about leadership. Who are some of the people in this industry that you turn to in your growth as leader, or somebody that you'd love to meet and would admire to learn more about?
Man, that's a good question. So most of my leadership growth has come from people outside the industry. If I'm being, in terms of like my mentors that I go to today, right? I've been very fortunate to have some great bosses in the industry that invested a lot in me, trusted me maybe when they didn't need to, gave me opportunities. Who is somebody I would like to meet? That's a good question. I'll have to think about that. Let me chew on that for a little bit longer. Yeah. And part of that's just because, and I say this as humbly as I can, but I've met so many people in the industry now. I'm trying to think of who I haven't met yet that I'm like, wow, I really, yeah. Yeah. Let me think about that. That's a good question.
Hey, Will from Pragma. As I'm growing and like becoming a manager and like growing into leadership positions, what advice would you give someone coming into a new organization for the first time, who is a leader, kind of working up to that director level, that higher level? How do you gain the respect of the engineers and the organization if you're not in the code as much, if you're not being able to demonstrate your true engineering skills? What kind of advice do you give people coming into a situation like that?
Yeah. I'll answer that with a question. When you were an engineer, right? Who are the bosses you respected the most, and was it because they were in the code with you?
Yeah, not necessarily in the code, but yeah, they knew about they knew how to give advice, I guess.
Yeah. So I believe strongly in remaining technical, right? I'll tell you one of the hardest jobs that I think I had in this regard was when I was leading the Unreal Engine team, because no disrespect to any other engineers, but some of the people on that team are like some of the smartest humans I've ever met. I mean, they're just like incredibly, ridiculously talented engineers. And and I was just like, I had a deep sense of imposter syndrome. I'm like, how am I gonna resonate with these folks? And so I did two things that I think helped. I don't know, you could go ask people from that team if I'm wrong about this. There were areas of the engine that I knew nothing about. And so I found the team or the tech director on that team or one of the principal engineers, and I said, can you mentor me on how this part of the engine works? I just want to, can we spend an hour a week for the next 6 weeks and just like explain to me, because I know nothing about this, how it works. I've forgotten a lot of that, but I remember a lot. I remember enough that the next time we're having a conversation or something like that, I could be like, oh, that's that thing we talked about. And you can ask, just show curiosity, show concern, show care for what they're doing. The other thing that I think is really important is the way you become useful. Besides doing your HR responsibilities as a manager and holding them accountable and getting the best performance you can out of them, et cetera, is to figure out what is in their way. Like, how can you help them? Anybody who's worked with me any period of time probably knows that I bet at the end of almost every conversation, I will ask, how can I help you? I mean, it's genuine. I mean that when I ask people that question, how can I help you? What can I do to make your job easier? One of the best pieces of advice I have ever gotten in my career, I didn't think much of it at the time, but it has just been so true, was if you can help people identify their burdens and offload them, you will have a wildly successful career. And I cannot tell you how true that is. Like, if you make it your job to find people's problems and make them go away, you will do well. And so I think to me, that's the key of building trust with your team, is if they view you as someone who has their back, someone who can help them be successful, and you take an interest in you're trying to learn, if for the areas you don't know, but don't try to be everything either, because you have a real job to do. You have real responsibilities that you can't ignore.
Maybe we have two more.
Hey, I'm Cody from CurseForge.
Hey, Cody.
How are you handling this kind of move towards more outsourced resources within the video game industry in general? And have you dealt with that a lot? And is there any skills in particular that engineers here could use to manage that better?
Yeah, this is one of those things that I mentioned that enterprise software has been doing for decades, somewhat successfully, somewhat not. The key to me of successfully outsourcing, and there's lots of different models, right? Partner, studio, dev, outsource, right? Like, it's kind of what we talked about earlier. Just make sure you got a great team that you can build a good relationship with, get to know them, et cetera, et cetera. If you're more in the contingent workforce kind of scenario, just my practical advice is invest in a very senior project manager, and I know that's project manager is kind of a bad word in the industry. I do mean a project manager. I mean, like a PMBOK carrying product management body of knowledge. They've been to school. They've got certifications. Like, they know how to go coordinate work and dog an issues list and manage risks and they're fearless in saying, hey, there's a problem here, and put them put them in charge of making sure that the work gets done and done well. My second piece of practical advice is, if you are able to, I would go visit wherever that place is, that contingent workforce is. Like, if you're using a team in Bangalore or whatever, like, go visit and you spend a little bit of time just trying to understand how they work and who they are and that kind of stuff. Like, even a light touch personal relationship goes a long, long way in doing that. Communication is key. Sorry, last thing. Your processes have to work. I would not put contingent workforce or that kind of thing on top of processes that are already shaky. You're just asking for trouble.
Hi, my name is Kunal from Riot Games. Super quick, perhaps. I'm really curious your opinion on how AI is playing a role in gaming industry. I'm just curious what you think.
Yeah. All my other Riot friends can tell you this is true. Was it probably 10 years ago, 12 years ago, maybe? I told everybody, if you're not learning AI now, you are going to be irrelevant in a decade. And I think that's starting to be true. I was dubious about AI last year. I was just like, it reminded me, I'm old enough to remember kind of the intro of the internet. And when everybody was trying to build e-commerce portals and all this and it was a huge hype train. And 5 great companies came out of that, out of a million. And so I kind of thought AI was going down that path. I have changed my tune in the last 6 months, in particular, 8 months now, probably. The acceleration of change is happening so quickly. And it's, I think Cursor is now the fastest growing application ever. Maybe in other tools since taken off. So I think if you're not learning it and you want to stay relevant, you need to be learning it. it's a complete. I don't know if anybody's tried vibe coding or not vibe coded. I know people have varying reactions to even the term vibe coding. Try it. I would encourage you to lean in and try and learn and see what the technology can and can't do. I made a WebAssembly Asteroids clone only prompting windsurf. And it was good. It was a good game. It was a good Asteroids clone in about 2 hours. So that's one. I think from a productivity and just cost perspective. Now, is AI going to write your production code for you? Probably not. But I'll give you a real example. I have a team. They're struggling with some data ingest into the client, to game data for client configuration. I was like, let's point AI at that database and have it create a bunch of UI for us to have better, cleaner data going into the system. Now they're going to get a 90% solution, and then they'll have to spend a month, fixing it. But if they started from scratch, like that's a 6-month project, right? So that kind of thing. I think I'm waiting to see somebody really leverage AI in gameplay. I think that's the thing I'm the most excited about. This is where back to what we were talking about earlier about innovative content and innovative stuff. I grew up with the Choose Your Own Adventure books, right? If anybody remembers those. I want, I'm waiting for that evolution of gaming so that you and I never play the same game, right? And then we can talk about that shared experience and what that does from a social perspective, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's here, it's real. It's not going to solve all the world's problems. It is going to cause others. But I think if you're not trying to leverage it now, especially if you have a title coming out in the next 2 or 3 years, I think you should rethink that.
All right. Maybe one more round of applause for Mike, and then
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.